And welcome back to the Correspondents on Voice of America. I'm Arcega in Washington. Well, we've been watching violent protests this week in Charlotte, North Carolina, after the controversial shooting there of an African-American man killed by a police officer. This after yet another fatal police shooting the same week in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where an officer killed an unarmed black man. Law enforcement agencies are desperately trying to find ways to reduce what many consider the unnecessary violence and fear during street encounters between police and citizens. Citizens that they're supposed to serve. VOA's Carolyn Presutti has more on that.
Riots at night in Charlotte, North Carolina, after a black officer shoots a black man holding a gun. Protesters shut down a major highway. Others try to overturn a police car. 12 officers hurt. The family angry with Charlotte police over the death of Keith Lamont Scott.
They said, hands up. He got a gun. He got a gun. Pow, 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 pow.
The officers gave loud, clear, verbal commands to drop the weapon.
A 16-hour drive straight west to Tulsa, Oklahoma, after a white police officer shot an unarmed black man who kept walking toward his own car.
Traffic, I've got a subject who won't show me his hands.
Video released by the police department shows Terrence Crutcher with his arms up. Crutcher and Scott are the latest of 706 people who have been shot dead by police so far this year. This Washington Post survey shows 173 were African American, 324 were white.
So, why do police officers keep killing civilians? Why does this keep happening? For that, I'm joined on Skype from Charlotte, North Carolina by VOA ace reporter and shooter Arash Arabasadi. Welcome, Arash. And to help us out here in our Washington studio, I'm joined by VOA's Carolyn Presutti, who filed that report that we just heard. Good to have you both. Arash, I'm going to start with you. As you know, we've seen several nights there, violent protests and looting. Midnight curfew was imposed on Thursday. How effective was that?
I wouldn't say it was too effective. We were working well into the night, probably around 2:30 was when we called it an evening. And just looking out the hotel window, we still saw demonstrators going down the street. Some of them kind of even slept on the sidewalk. So I don't think the curfew was super effective, but we didn't see anything that was out of control last night either.
Was that because there was so much media outside? I mean, how do you force people to go inside when there's cameras everywhere, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of a mixed bag, too. As with our cameras, we got different reception from different people. But, yeah, I mean, obviously, when the cameras are rolling, people are going to behave in a different way, I would think.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder if the camera actually influences that. That was a good report, by the way, Carolyn. And I like some of the information that you put in there. But we are seeing these types of events far too often, and every time we see a protest like this, it is fueled in large part by the effectiveness of social media, right? It's effective in galvanizing people, perhaps not as accurate as it should be.
Well, I think people are so used to looking on their phones for social media and believing whatever they see. You know, it used to be...
Because I mean, as soon as we found out about this, I think the protesters automatically assumed it was a white officer, right?
And in this case, it was a black officer shooting a black man, right? And even in the Tulsa case, you know, I mean, we heard that he had a gun. No, he didn't have a gun. Well, it turns out that he probably didn't have a gun. Whereas in the Charlotte case, it turns out that he may have had a gun, but they aren't releasing the video yet, so we really can't tell, right or not. But I think it just kind of compounds on itself when somebody weighs in on social media, then somebody gives an opinion, then another person puts another opinion on that. It's 24/7 exposure to social media, and it's all opinion.
Right, and I'm sure, Arash, you're hearing all sorts of opinion there on the protest sites. What do they want out of what is their motivation for these protests? To expose what they see as injustice? Or is there something specific they're looking for? Perhaps a video? Do they want that video released publicly?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. On one hand, you definitely have people who want justice. There's no justice, no peace signs being carried and chants being heard. But also, you have demonstrators who, just like the mayor, are calling for the release of the video. We heard yesterday that the lawyers for the family of the victim did watch the video, but they're not commenting on it. So that's really what we have right now.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that if the crowds will become even more incited if that video is released
I
publicly.
think that's what they're afraid of.
That's what
I think
they're
because
afraid
they
of.
say that the video doesn't really show whether or not he was holding a gun because of the angle of it.
Right, it's hard to determine that. But in your report, I found it very interesting that you said 173 African Americans have been killed by police this year so far, versus more than 300 white civilians who have been killed by police. From that graph, it seems like police are killing more white people. So why are we focusing on the blacks getting killed?
Exactly. I found that interesting that there was such a discrepancy between whites and blacks,
Yeah.
but then you also have to take into account, though, the population, because
see.
blacks don't make up 50% of our population, right? But then you also have to look at how many African Americans are involved in those dangerous situations as compared to whites, i.e. how many are being arrested as compared to whites. So you can't just look at the numbers there. But what else was fascinating was the fact that the FBI has kept these numbers for years, but yet the Washington Post said, we're going to create our own database because their numbers are too low. And it turns out they really were. And as of now, the end of September, we're on track with the same amount of killings as last year. So it's obvious we need to get a better handle on this. We need to figure out what needs to be done in the departments to curb this violence. And what needs to be done on the streets, too. I'm not just saying police are at fault. I'm saying that the police don't trust the people because they think the people are going to shoot them. And I think the people think that the police are going to shoot them. So there has to be that trust.
There's a lot of questions up in the air. And Arash, I'm trying to get a sense from you. Do police anticipate more protests over the weekend? Is this curfew going to continue?
The curfew was lifted this morning at 6 o'clock, and it was business as usual down in the Center City area of Charlotte. I'm not sure what's going to happen tonight, but last night, not only were the police out on their bicycles and really just kind of standing out in the middle of the street, but there were also police in full riot gear. And they were really just kind of standing their ground, and then they reached a point where they all mobilized and actually came back to our hotel where I'm sitting right now.
Literally 10 seconds, Carolyn. Are these types of incidents growing or are they decreasing?
We are at 40 less than we were last year.
But then we still have time to go. Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you, Arash, and to all our correspondents. That is our show this week, but we will be back again next week for another edition of The Correspondents. In the meantime, stay up to date with all the news from around the world at voanews.com. Do check it out and our other shows as well. Just click on the tab marked Watch on the upper right and pick your program. We're also on Facebook and YouTube at VOA The Correspondents. Thank you for watching. I'm Arcega, and for now, so long from Washington.